I was watching a review by a YouTube channel called The Needle Drop, very popular record review channel, and it was reviewing In the Night Side Eclipse by Emperor. Got the shirt here. This is a black metal album, obviously, because the title of the video, and he talked about how when people ask him about black metal, they come to him and basically say, they've listened to some black metal and it's very rough around the edges. Just very inaccessible. So they ask for much more accessible albums of the black metal genre. And he went on to say that In the Night Side Eclipse, compared to other black metal, is relatively accessible. And this made me think, if I was trying to get someone into black metal, if they were interested, of course, you can't shove your music taste down someone's throat. Like, if someone was interested into black metal, what albums from my collection would I recommend they listen to in terms of them being more accessible than the rest of black metal? And I came up with, there were many candidates, but I decided to go with 4 albums, 2 CDs and 2 vinyl in my collection. So with most black metal, as he put it, as the Needle Drop put it, it's very rough, it's very lo-fi, rough around the edges, and it's not very accessible, and it's never really been a music genre that's sought to be accessible. What I think gets a lot of people, to be repulsed by black metal music is the lo-fi production, so low production value, and the shrieked / growled vocals. The difference between vocals in say black metal music versus death metal music is whereas death metal music has the growls have a much more lower register, but with black metal music the growls or shrieks, whatever, have a much higher register. Anyway, people generally don't like the kind of shrieked vocals. They don't like growled vocals in death metal either, but they especially don't like the shrieked vocals. So with that in mind, that's what I based my kind of selections on. All of them, except for one, have some clean vocals thrown in there. And they're all very melodic, and the production is of much higher quality than compared to other black metal. So, without further ado, so you're looking to get into black metal, what would I recommend? Now, I made this video because when I first got into black metal, the first black metal album that I ever really got into was called Storm of the Lights, made by a melodic black metal band from Sweden called Dissection. And the first time I heard it, although it's much more on the melodic side, I was absolutely terrified. I found the album genuinely terrifying. I was scared of it. Oh, how times have changed. But I was very scared. And yet it was the first black metal album I really listened to and really got into. So over time, I kind of adjusted myself to the music. I started to be able to pick out melodies and so on and so forth. But it still was very difficult for me to get into. And I was thinking that maybe my listening experience would have been much, much easier if I would have started out with these albums. So that's what I'm going to do to you. So if you want to get into black metal, or at least if you're interested in listening to it, and you're looking for something accessible, I'm your man, currently. So without further ado, let's present the albums that I recommend. I would not recommend Storm of the Lights Bane, but at least not in the context of this video, for first-time black metal listeners, unless you're kind of used to the more harsher vocals and more kind of sinister atmosphere produced by it. But anyway, without further ado, let's start with the most accessible album in my entire collection. And this is a vinyl record. And it's called The Mantle by a band named Agaloc. Now, this is so melodic, very soft, so soft compared to most black metal that it's oftentimes debated. So it falls, I think, it's very difficult to label Agaloc, but I think the best subgenre of black metal that describes this is called post-black metal. You know, you could use this other fancy terms like atmospheric black metal, folk black metal, dark folk black metal, whatever, but I think post-black metal is the best way to describe it. And the vocals, although they're still shriek, they have a kind of, so there's a combination of clean vocals and shriek vocals, and even the shriek vocals, they're still done like very melodic instrumentation in the background. And it's just done in a very mild, kind of modest way. If you're more into the ambient side of music, the music that emphasizes on building an atmosphere rather than outright catchiness, then I think this album is for you. If you're a classical music fan, this might be sort of more up your alley. It's not overly technical, like in terms of it being difficult to play, but yeah, it's my recommendation. And as far as the lyrical themes are concerned, it more deals with like, as far as I know, like folklore and stuff like that. It doesn't deal with, and from my understanding, a man's search for religion, I believe. I could be wrong. But I know this for sure, there's no like satanic themes in here, which is common with black metal. And as well, Agaloc was not associated with any of the extreme acts of violence that were committed in the Norwegian black metal scene. They just weren't. First off, they're not even from Norway, they're from the United States. And this band started in the late 90s, whereas the second wave of black metal in Norway started in the early 90s. So there's no like atrocious actions associated with this band. You don't have to worry about if you buy this album, your money going towards any kind of shady stuff or going towards people who've committed horrible actions. So I'd recommend giving this album a whirl. And it is debated whether or not it's even considered black metal. That's how melodic it is. So it's just something to consider itself. Although I will say, if you're looking for more, if you're into like pop music and rap music, you want to be looking for a black metal album with lots of hooks, and this ain't it, chief. So you might not like this album if you're into pop music and rap music. But yeah, just give it a listen. It's very beautiful. I love this album personally. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. I'd say top 5 albums, period, of all time. Not just metal, not just black metal albums, period. So yeah, I think you should give this a whirl. And why not show the back of this album? I would open it up, crack it open and show you the inside and show you the vinyl and stuff, but I'm worried like the way I'd have to open it, the way I'd have to hold it might damage the case or whatever, the album cover or whatever, so I'm not going to do that. The next album, this is the second most, I consider the second most accessible black metal album I have in my collection. And this is by a Norwegian black metal band. Part of the second wave of black metal, or they started off as black metal, and the band is called Ulver. And this album is called Bergtatt. Now, where a lot of the Norwegian black metal bands were into the whole kind of Satanism, the occult sort of thing, burning down churches, extreme acts of violence, that sort of thing, Ulver weren't really, actually no, they weren't a part of it at all. And their lyrics, I can't read Norwegian, but as far as I know, I know for 100% sure that there's no satanic themes in here at all. And this album, in fact, actually has the first track on this album, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce, has entirely clean vocals. So there's that bonus to kind of hook you in, and it kind of combines these passages of extreme melody and beautiful acoustic guitars, kind of dark folk-ish music with, and then all of a sudden it'll transition to this very brutal, yet melodic in a sense, shrieked vocals. So yeah, there's a yin and yang on this kind of album. And the production value, it's still relatively raw, but as far as black metal is concerned, it's relatively well produced, I'd say. And the closing outro for the last track on this album is absolutely gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. I love it. So much so that I learned how to play it on guitar. It took me a little bit, but I got it. But yeah, Bergtatt by Ulver, a very accessible choice. Take a closer look at the album cover if you want. It's not that good. Not that good of a view because my screen is in the way. The reflection and stuff. But yeah, I highly recommend this one. The next album I have is the third most accessible album in my collection. And this is by an American black metal act called, and this is much more underground black metal, like they're not mentioned, they're not the first bands mentioned in the conversation about black metal. They're quite underground. They're named Nell, and this album is called Lore of a Sleeping Forest. This belongs to a subgenre of black metal called atmospheric black metal. The use of, I believe there's the use of keyboards on this album, and it's just an emphasis on more building atmosphere. And yet the atmosphere on this album is not what you would call, I wouldn't call it like sinister. No, not at all. It's very, it just gives you this kind of almost sad, forlorning feeling. The track listing and this album cover really fits the vibe of the music. The track listing, like, just listen to some of the track songs: Longing for Winter, Lore of a Sleeping Forest, Acceptance of Misery, Echoes of Torment, My Cold Fate. That kind of fits the vibe of the album. Well, and there's actually 2 discs, and it's a very long album. It's an hour and 40 minutes long. So, you might want to pace yourself with this, but the entire disc B has no vocals at all. And this is the only, I was mistaken when I said that all these albums have a combination of clean vocals and shrieked vocals. I believe the only vocals on this album is shrieked vocals, but they're done in a very controlled and just very well executed way. You might be able to get behind them. I just listened to the first track, Longing for Winter, and that's about as brutal as the album gets. But yeah, anyway, on disc B there's actually no vocals at all. It's entirely instrumental music. So maybe you might want to listen to the disc B, which is starting off with, disc B starts off with Etheric Nights. So you can just Google this album, go to YouTube, and it'll show up a video on, I believe, Black Metal Promotions, and there's also another video on Atmospheric Black Metal YouTube channel that has this full album available, and just give it a shot. Very melodic, very beautiful. I love this album, and I'm glad I ordered it, and I'm glad I get to support this music. It's nice to support more underground music, because I feel like a lot of underground bands deserve to have more success than they do. Some underground bands are underground for a reason, but some bands, in my opinion, deserve much more exposure. I hope this band is able to break into the mainstream. That'd be really nice. I really do wish this band a bunch of success. It's a great recommendation for a beginner into black metal. So, This one might cause a little bit of controversy that I'm recommending, and might kind of raise some red flags, but I'm going to recommend it anyway because it's the fourth, what I would consider the fourth most accessible album in my collection, and the album is called, it's a vinyl actually, and it's by a symphonic black metal band. They're widely considered the first symphonic black metal band, and the band is called Emperor. I'm actually wearing their shirt. The album is called Anthems to the Welkin at Dusk, or Anthems to the Welkin at Dusk. I always mess up that name. I always do it every single darn time. It's frustrating. But so they were the first kind of band to use keyboards and stuff on their first album, In the Nightside Eclipse. This is their second studio album, by the way. And they kind of inspired all this use of keyboards on future black metal bands like Null, for example. I believe they use keyboards. Oh my god. I can't believe I don't know whether or not they use keyboards or not. Like, that's kind of cringe. But, yeah, anyway, so they inspired a bunch of black metal bands with their use of keyboards like Null, like Dim Borgir, and other bands that I can't think of off the top of my head because I'm freezing because I'm recording. Like, you get recording anxiety and you forget stuff that's supposed to be off the top of your head. But anyway, yeah. So you might be asking, well, why not recommend their first album, In the Nightside Eclipse? So the reason why I wouldn't recommend it is it's a much more dark album, and it's very atmospheric, very melodic, but the atmosphere is very sinister, and very uneasy, and you also have the fact that the drummer on their first album was a man named Faust, and he got sent to prison for committing, I haven't listed a trigger warning at the beginning of this video, so I can't talk about it in depth, but for committing an extreme act of violence, and he got sent to prison. So some people might take issue with listening to that particular drummer who did those certain things. And as well, in the first album, you have, I believe, it's much more obscured than any other black metal acts, but you have much more satanic adjacent, I'd say, themes. It's more so dark fantasy, but you do have some satanic themes. Like, one of the song titles is called Opuses Satana. But, well, I'm finally actually talking about the music on this album and not In the Nightside Eclipse. But this album very much strays away from it. It kind of goes lyrically into the more mystical thing. This is the most inaccessible albums of the ones that I will recommend to beginners. But the production on this album is very well done for black metal, very clean, relatively speaking. Even cleaner than In the Nightside Eclipse. Things are mixed more efficiently, in my opinion, like the mixing of the vocals, the drums, the guitars, etc. are much more well done. There is some very brutal, heavy, hardcore moments with the vocals, and it's throughout the album. There's shrieked vocals. However, there's also clean vocals in here, so it's a mixture of clean vocals and harsh vocals, and it's done. And the clean vocals are done extremely well. One track I would recommend is called With Strength I Burn. You kind of get a taste of what this album's all about with this. Well, I should probably mention the drummer that committed the extreme act of violence on the first album is not on this album at all because he was in prison. So they got another drummer to do it named Trim. I completely butchered his pronunciation, but yeah, he's on the back. See, you don't find Faust, Faust, or Faust, or however you pronounce his name at all on this album. The drummer is right here. See him sitting in the, I think he's sitting in some kind of chair. Really cool. Ensemble has a lot of very catchy moments as well. Like a lot of, I would say of all the black metal albums that I've recommended, this one is by far the most catchy. And yet it's also melodic, well produced, and throws in some clean vocals as well. So, in a sense, it's the most abrasive and most brutal of the albums that I'm recommending here. It's still a fantastic album, and if you can kind of accustom yourself to more brutal and harsher vocals, I think you'll be able to get into this album. So yeah, as far as accessibility is concerned, these are the albums that I would like to recommend to anyone trying to get into black metal. If you have any questions about black metal, I'm not like the absolute expert on black metal. I only got into it recently, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you have or concerns or whatever. Black metal, I will say, is not for everyone. It's not everyone's cup of tea. Metal music isn't even everyone's cup of tea, and even rock music isn't everyone's cup of tea. It appeals to certain people and just doesn't to other people. But in saying that, I think if you kind of start off with the more kind of melodic, less harsh, less rough around the edges black metal first, if you kind of acclimatize yourself with the kind of brutality of those albums, you can it's sort of like going to a gym. You start off squatting or bench pressing, even just the bar possibly, and you gradually build up the weight over time. So this is the same thing with black metal or metal in general. You start off with something relatively lightweight, and then you kind of build yourself up over time to the more heavy and extreme stuff. And I will be making another video, a part 2 to this, so it will be revolving around these Swedish black metal bands that I recommend you listen to. They're not quite as accessible as the ones that I recommended, but they're still relatively accessible. And it'll include bands like Dissection, Sacramentum, Dawn, Winterland, that sort of thing. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed my video. If you did enjoy my video, like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell. I'm well aware that I have a long way to go when it comes to ASMR. I'm not that fantastic yet, but I'm learning, and I've recently updated my camera, my equipment. And if you really wanted to, it'd be really nice if you donated to my Patreon. Again, absolutely under no obligation. But if you think that I have some potential to kind of grow as an ASMR channel and improve, if you donate to my Patreon, I promise that every single penny right now will go towards improving my production, improving my equipment, that sort of thing. I won't be keeping it to myself for no reason. So yeah, my Patreon's in the description if you're interested. But again, you do not have to. I will not be upset with you if you do not donate. It's totally cool. It's there if you're interested. And I'm having a hard time ending this video, so I'm just going to awkwardly end it in a bad way to show that I'm a rookie at this whole ASMR game. Have a great